The wind moaned through the pines, carrying whispers of a coming storm. Rebecca Miller stood at her clinic window, watching clouds gather over Widow's Peak like bruises on the evening sky. The lantern in her hand cast shadows across the worn floorboards as she counted her remaining medical supplies, barely enough to last the month. 3 rolls of bandages, half a bottle of laudanum, suture thread nearly gone. The small leather bag of birthing tools her grandmother had passed down sat open on the table, instruments gleaming in the dim light. There wasn't much left. Not of the supplies, not of her savings, and certainly not of the town's respect. But the clinic was all she had now. Her husband had died the previous winter from pneumonia that took him so quickly, even her medical knowledge couldn't save him. The town of Pine Creek had mourned briefly and forgotten quickly, as small towns often do with their tragedies. And they'd looked at Rebecca with those same judgmental eyes they reserved for women who lived outside convention, too educated to be trusted, too independent to be proper. Her small clinic sat at the edge of town, where the forest began to climb, where only those desperate enough for her remedies or too poor for Dr. Porter's services in town would venture. Most days, Rebecca wasn't sure whether she was the brave one or the foolish one for staying. The rain began, soft at first, then urgent against the roof. Rebecca turned to check her buckets. The leak above the medicine cabinet was getting worse. That's when she heard it. Not thunder, but something else. Horses approaching fast, then voices, sharp and tense outside her door. Before we jump back, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The clinic door burst open, bringing with it the storm's fury, and 3 men with bandanas pulled high over their faces. Rebecca's heart hammered against her ribs as she backed against the cabinet, her hand finding the small scalpel she kept for emergencies. But then she saw the 4th figure, a woman, heavy with child, eyes wild with pain, supported between 2 of the men. "Help her!" the tallest man commanded, his voice low and dangerous beneath his black bandana. His eyes, startlingly blue against the mask, held hers with an intensity that left no room for refusal. "Now!" the pregnant woman moaned, doubling over as another contraction seized her. Rebecca hesitated only a moment before setting down the scalpel and moving forward. Whatever these men had done, whoever they were, the woman needed her. "Put her on that bed," she instructed, professional instincts overriding fear, "and bring that lantern closer." The men obeyed, easing the laboring woman onto Rebecca's examination table. Up close, Rebecca could see the family resemblance between the woman and the man who'd spoken. The same striking blue eyes, the same determined set of the jaw beneath her pain. "She's my sister," the man said, as if reading Rebecca's thoughts. He pulled down his bandana, revealing a face weathered by sun and hardship, a scar cutting through his beard along his left jaw. "The baby's coming too early. We were trying to reach the next county when the storm hit." Rebecca checked the woman's pulse, racing, and placed her hands on the swollen belly, feeling the contraction's intensity. "What's her name?" "Sophia," he replied, still standing too close, watching Rebecca's every move. Outside, another horse approached at speed. One of the men peered through the window and cursed. "Caleb, it's the law. Someone must have seen us ride in." The leader, Caleb, tensed. "How many?" "Just the sheriff and 1 deputy from what I can see." Caleb's hand moved to his gun. "Keep them busy. We're not leaving until she's safe." Rebecca's blood turned cold as she realized who these men must be. Stories had circulated for months about the Donovan gang. Outlaws who'd robbed 3 banks across Mountain Valley County, known for their precision and the fact they'd never killed anyone during their heists. Their leader, Caleb Donovan, was said to be as intelligent as he was dangerous. And now he stood in her clinic, his sister writhing in pain on her table with the sheriff outside. "The baby's breech," Rebecca announced, pushing aside her realization. I'll need to turn it, or neither will survive the birth." Sophia screamed, as another contraction tore through her. Outside, a man's voice, Sheriff Wilson, called out for whoever was inside to come out with their hands up. "Do what you need to do," Caleb said to Rebecca, his voice steady despite the chaos. Then to his men, "You know what to do. No shooting unless there's no choice." The other men slipped out the back door while Caleb bolted the front. Rebecca worked quickly, rolling up her sleeves and washing her hands in the basin. "I need clean. Linens, hot water from that kettle, and my birthing bag there on that shelf." To her surprise, Caleb gathered everything with efficiency, moving around her small clinic as if he'd been assisting births all his life. Outside, she could hear the sheriff's demands growing more insistent, followed by the sounds of a scuffle. "They'll keep them occupied," Caleb said, handing Rebecca a clean towel. "Just focus on Sophia." For the next hour, the world narrowed to the space between Rebecca's hands and Sophia's pain. The storm raged. The occasional shout from outside pierced the night, but Rebecca worked with the calm precision that had earned her a reputation as the finest midwife in 3 counties. Before Dr. Porter had arrived with his modern methods and male authority, Sophia was strong, gripping Rebecca's hand with surprising force between contractions as Rebecca guided the baby into position. Caleb never left his sister's side, speaking softly to her in encouragement, wiping her brow, following Rebecca's instructions without question. When the baby finally emerged, a tiny boy with a shock of dark hair, the silence that followed his first strangled breath stretched too long. Rebecca worked swiftly, clearing his airways, rubbing his small chest as Caleb watched, his face a mask of controlled fear. Then came the cry, weak at first, then stronger. The room seemed to exhale all at once. "He's small, but fighting," Rebecca said, wrapping the infant in clean linen before placing him in Sophia's trembling arms. "Like his mother." Sophia wept, touching her son's face with reverent fingers. "Thank you," she whispered. "I thought we were both going to die tonight." Rebecca smiled, the first genuine smile she'd felt in months. "Not on my watch." The moment of peace shattered as a gunshot cracked outside, followed by shouts. Caleb moved to the window, peering cautiously through. "The curtain. We need to move soon," he said, turning back to his sister. "Can you ride?" Sophia, pale and exhausted, looked down at her newborn. "I don't know." Rebecca stepped between them. "She can't travel, not tonight, maybe not for days. She's lost blood, and the baby is premature. Moving them would be dangerous." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Staying is dangerous too." Another shout from outside, closer now. One of Caleb's men appeared at the back door, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. "They've called for reinforcements from the next town over. We need to go now, Caleb." Rebecca made a decision that would change everything. "Take your men and go. Draw them away. I'll keep Sophia and the baby here." Caleb stared at her. "Why would you do that?" "Because I'm a midwife. Because they need care. Because I took an oath." She met his gaze steadily. "The sheriff knows me. I'll say she arrived alone in labor. He has no reason not to believe me." For a long moment, Caleb studied her face, searching for deception. Then he turned to his sister, pressing his lips to her forehead. "I'll come back for you when it's safe," he promised, then gently touched his nephew's cheek. "Keep him strong." He straightened, looking back at Rebecca with an intensity that made her breath catch. "If anything happens to them—" "It won't," she interrupted. "Now go before they surround us completely." Caleb hesitated, then reached into his coat and placed something on her table, a small leather pouch that clinked with the unmistakable sound of coins. "For your trouble," he said. Before she could respond, he and his injured companion slipped out the back door and into the storm. Rebecca moved quickly, hiding the pouch in her medicine cabinet, then disheveling her own clothing and hair. She splashed water on her face and took a deep breath. Then she opened the front door and screamed for Sheriff Wilson. The next few hours passed in controlled chaos. The sheriff, suspicious but ultimately convinced by Rebecca's story of a desperate woman arriving alone on her doorstep, posted a deputy outside the clinic for protection before heading out with his men to continue the search for the Donovan gang. Dr. Porter arrived, bristling with professional indignation that Rebecca had handled the birth alone, examining Sophia and the baby with thinly veiled skepticism before declaring that Rebecca's care had been adequate under the circumstances. By dawn, the story had spread through Pine Creek. Rebecca Miller had delivered an unknown woman's baby during the very night the notorious Donovan gang had been spotted in the area. Some whispered connections, others credited divine timing that had kept Rebecca and her patient safe while outlaws roamed nearby. Only Rebecca, Sophia, and the sleeping infant knew the truth. 3 days passed. Sophia grew stronger. Her son, whom she named Joseph, began to nurse properly. The deputy outside grew bored and spent more time at the general store across the way than at his post. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Rebecca changed bandages at the clinic during the day and sat with Sophia and Joseph at night, finding unexpected comfort in their company after months of solitude following her husband's death. "Why did you help us?" Sophia asked on the third night, as they sat by the small fire in Rebecca's living quarters. "You could have called for the sheriff the moment we arrived." Rebecca considered the question, her hands busy preparing a tincture for a patient with a persistent cough. "I've never turned away anyone who needed help," she said finally. "And I've seen enough suffering to know that people are rarely just one thing, criminal or innocent, good or bad." Sophia smiled weakly. "Caleb would like that answer. He's always said the world isn't as simple as the law makes it out to be." "Is that why he became an outlaw?" Rebecca asked, unable to contain her curiosity. Sophia's eyes grew distant. "Our family had a ranch north of here. When the railroad wanted our land, they offered nothing close to its worth. When our father refused to sell, there was a fire." She stroked her sleeping baby's head. "The court ruled it an accident, but Caleb found evidence otherwise. When the law wouldn't listen, he decided to make his own justice." Rebecca wanted to ask more, but the sound of horses approaching silenced them both. Sophia tensed, clutching Joseph closer. Rebecca moved to the window, peering carefully through the curtain, her breath caught. 3 riders approached through the darkness, moving slowly, deliberately. Even in the dim moonlight, she recognized the broad-shouldered silhouette leading them. "It's Caleb," she whispered, and Sophia's eyes filled with tears of relief. Rebecca slipped outside, closing the door quietly behind her. The night air was cool after the rain, mist clinging to the pines surrounding her small property. She walked toward the riders, heart beating too fast against her ribs. Caleb dismounted, his movements fluid, despite what looked like a bandage beneath his shirt. His men remained on horseback, watching the road leading from town. "You kept your word," he said simply, stopping a few feet from her. "They're both well," she replied. "The baby is small but growing stronger. Sophia can travel soon if she's careful." He nodded, studying her face in the moonlight. "No trouble from the law? They believe she's a widow passing through. The deputy barely glances this way anymore." A silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken questions. Finally, Caleb spoke, his voice low. "I came to take them somewhere safe, and to thank you." "You already paid me," Rebecca reminded him, thinking of the pouch she'd hidden away, still untouched. "Money doesn't cover what you did." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his beard, the way his eyes reflected the stars overhead. "You saved my family when you had every reason to turn us in." Rebecca didn't step back. I'm a midwife. That's what I do. Not many would have done the same. He glanced toward the clinic. I found a place for them, a small homestead over the mountains where no one will look. Sophia will be safe there until... He stopped himself. Until what? Rebecca asked. He met her gaze directly. Until I finish what I started and we can stop running. She should have been afraid, standing alone in the darkness with a known outlaw. Instead, she felt something else entirely, a strange recognition, as if she were looking at someone who, despite everything that separated them, somehow understood the isolation she'd felt since losing her husband, since choosing a path the town never quite accepted. I should get them ready to travel, she said finally, turning back toward the clinic. Rebecca. Her name in his voice stopped her. She turned back, surprised he knew it. The territory beyond the ridge isn't safe these days. Raiders, wild animals, sickness. My sister will need someone with medical knowledge. She frowned. What are you saying? I want to offer you protection in exchange for your continued care of Sophia and Joseph. Protection. She almost laughed. I don't need protecting, Mr. Donovan. His expression remained serious. Everyone needs protecting. Sometimes, even midwives who live alone at the edge of town, with supplies running low and patients who can rarely pay. The accuracy of his assessment unnerved her. Are you proposing to rob more banks on my behalf? Something like a smile touched his lips. I'm proposing an arrangement. You helped my family when no one else would. Let me return that debt. By making me your personal midwife? The absurdity struck her suddenly. I have a life here, patients who depend on me. Do you? His question cut deeper than she expected. From what I've observed, this town barely values what you offer. The doctor undermines you. The women who once sought your skills now follow his recommendations instead. Rebecca stiffened. You've been watching me. I make it my business to know everything about a situation before I act. He gestured toward Pine Creek. This town is dying, Rebecca. The railroad will bypass it completely now that the new route is approved. In 5 years, there will be nothing left here but memories. She wanted to deny it, but the signs had been there for months. Families moving away, businesses closing, the general store stocking less with each passing season. Even Dr. Porter had begun mentioning opportunities in the larger settlement 30 miles east. Caleb continued, his voice gentler. Now, I'm not asking you to become an outlaw. I'm offering you a place where your skills would be valued, needed. A fresh start with my guarantee of safety. And if I refuse, he stepped back, respecting her space, then I take my sister and nephew tonight, and you never see any of us again. Your life continues as before. The thought of never knowing. What happened to Sophia and little Joseph created an unexpected ache in her chest. In just 3 days, they had filled some of the emptiness in her small home, given her purpose beyond mixing remedies for minor ailments and delivering the occasional baby from families too poor to afford Dr. Porter's services. I need time to think, she said finally. Caleb nodded. Dawn. We need to move before full light. Rebecca returned to the clinic, her mind racing. Sophia looked up from the rocking chair. Hope and fear mingled in her expression. He's come for us? She asked, already knowing the answer. Yes. Rebecca busied herself gathering the herbs she'd been drying. He wants me to come with you, to continue caring for you and Joseph. Sophia's face brightened. And will you? Rebecca turned, meeting the younger woman's gaze. Would you want me to? More than anything, Sophia said without hesitation. I trust you with our lives, Rebecca, and the place Caleb has found, it's remote. There will be other women there who need someone with your knowledge. Other women? Rebecca frowned. What place is this exactly? Sophia shifted Joseph in her arms. A settlement. People like us who couldn't find justice or peace within the law's boundaries. Caleb has been helping families relocate there for months. Widows whose land was stolen, farmers ruined by the banks, people the world has forgotten. The pieces clicked together suddenly. The precision of the bank robberies, the lack of casualties, the stories of the Donovan gang appearing in small, struggling towns across the territory. "He's building something," Rebecca murmured. "A place where people can start over," Sophia confirmed, "where someone like you would be valued for what you offer, not judged for being different." Rebecca moved to the window, looking out at the three riders waiting in the darkness. Her clinic, once her pride, felt suddenly small and shabby in the moonlight. Pine Creek had been her husband's home, never truly hers. Since his death, the invisible walls around her had only grown higher. The whispers, the decreasing patience, Dr. Porter's constant reminders that her methods were outdated. What kept her here, really? The answer came with startling clarity, nothing but fear of the unknown and a stubborn refusal to admit defeat. She turned back to Sophia. "I'll need to pack my supplies." The relief on the younger woman's face made the decision feel right, despite its madness. "Caleb will keep you safe," Sophia promised. "He protects what he values." By the time the eastern sky began to lighten, Rebecca had packed her essential belongings, her medical instruments, herbs, the books her grandmother had passed down, a few cherished items from her home. Everything else she left behind, including a letter addressed to Emma, her one true friend in town, explaining only that she had been called away to help a patient and didn't know when she would return. She didn't mention the pouch of coins she'd left on Dr. Porter's doorstep, payment for the patients she was abandoning. Let him wonder where it came from. Caleb had produced a fourth horse, a steady mare with gentle eyes. He helped secure Rebecca's bags, then assisted Sophia and the baby onto another mount, specially fitted with a secure seat. The sky was turning pearl gray as they prepared to leave. "Last chance to change your mind," Caleb said quietly, standing beside Rebecca as she looked. Back at the clinic that had been her home for 7 years, she thought of the town waking without her, of Dr. Porter's smug satisfaction when he discovered she'd gone, of the patients who had gradually stopped coming anyway. Then she thought of Sophia's words about a place where her skills would matter, where people needed what she could offer. "I'm not changing my mind," she said, turning to meet his gaze. "But understand this, Mr. Donovan. I'm not coming because I believe in whatever cause you're fighting for. I'm coming because a mother and child need me, and because there's nothing here worth staying for anymore." Something like respect flickered in his eyes. Fair enough. He helped her mount the mare, his hands strong and sure. "And it's Caleb. I think we're well past formalities, don't you?" As they rode away from Pine Creek, the first rays of sunrise breaking over Widow's Peak, Rebecca felt something unexpected. Not fear or regret, but a strange lightness, as if she were leaving behind more than just a building and a town. The path ahead led into uncertain territory, guided by a man the law called dangerous, but who had shown her nothing but respect. She didn't know what awaited her beyond the ridge in this settlement of outcasts and new beginnings. But for the first time since her husband's death, Rebecca Miller was riding towards something, not just enduring what remained. Beside her, Caleb Donovan rode tall in his saddle, eyes fixed on the horizon, a man with purpose. Behind them, Sophia hummed softly to little Joseph, a family saved by an unexpected alliance. And somewhere ahead, beyond the pine forests and mountain passes, lay a future Rebecca couldn't yet imagine, one where a midwife who delivered a baby during a robbery might find more than just purpose. She might find home. The morning sun climbed higher as they traveled, casting long shadows through the pine forests. Rebecca's mare followed the trail steadily, needing little guidance. She studied the three riders ahead of her, Caleb leading, vigilant and straight-backed, his two men flanking Sophia, who cradled Joseph against her chest in a sling Rebecca had fashioned from a soft blanket. They moved with the synchronized precision of people who had ridden together for years, communicating with subtle gestures rather than words. 4 hours into their journey, the trail narrowed as they began to climb. The air grew thinner, scented with wildflowers and pine resin. Rebecca's thighs ached from the unaccustomed riding. It had been years since she'd traveled, farther than the neighboring farms. Still, she kept pace without complaint, unwilling to show weakness. "We'll rest at the high meadow," Caleb called back, the first words spoken since their departure. "There's fresh water and shelter if we need it." Rebecca nodded, though he wasn't, looking her way. She watched how he constantly scanned their surroundings, alert to every sound, every movement in the trees. This was a man accustomed to being hunted. When they reached the meadow an hour later, Rebecca dismounted gratefully, her legs nearly buckling beneath her. The clearing was beautiful, a natural bowl cradled between two ridges, carpeted with summer grasses and wildflowers. A clear spring, bubbling from rocks at its center. Caleb's men, whom she now knew as Eli and Marcus, helped Sophia from her horse. The young mother looked pale but determined, checking Joseph immediately. Rebecca moved to her side. "How are you feeling?" she asked quietly, professional concern overriding her own discomfort. "Sore," Sophia admitted, "but we've made it this far in better shape than I expected." Rebecca checked the baby, unwrapping him carefully. Joseph blinked up at her, his tiny face red but his breathing steady. "He's strong for one born early," she observed, rewrapping him securely. "But you both need proper rest soon." Caleb approached, offering a canteen of fresh water. "How much farther can they travel today?" he asked Rebecca directly. "Another few hours at most," she replied honestly. "We shouldn't risk more." He nodded, accepting her assessment without question. "There's a line cabin 3 miles ahead where we can spend the night. It's secluded, defensible." While Eli prepared a simple meal of jerky and hardtack, Rebecca gathered herbs growing along the meadow's edge. Yarrow for bleeding, wild mint for Sophia's milk production, pine needles for a vitamin tea. Her fingers moved with practiced efficiency, finding comfort in this familiar task amid so much uncertainty. She felt Caleb watching her before she saw him, a prickling awareness between her shoulder blades. When she turned, he was standing a few paces away, arms crossed over his chest. "You know your plants," he observed. "My grandmother was a healer before me," Rebecca replied, tucking the herbs into her apron pocket. "She taught me to find medicine, wherever I am. Useful skill in the territories. Necessary skill," she corrected, "especially when proper medicines are scarce." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "You'll find plenty who appreciate that where we're going." She straightened, meeting his gaze directly. "And where exactly is that?" Sophia mentioned a settlement, but little else. Caleb glanced toward his sister, who was resting against a fallen log, while Marcus stood watch nearby. "Cedar Valley. It's 3 days' ride from here, nestled in a canyon most maps don't show. Good water, fertile soil, defensible position." "And filled with outlaws?" she asked pointedly. His expression hardened slightly. "Filled with people who needed a second chance. Widows whose husbands died in company mines. Farmers driven off their land by railroad men. A few who've had trouble with the law, yes, but mostly just folks looking for a fair shake. And you're what? Their protector?" "Something like that." He looked away toward the distant peaks. "The money from the banks goes back to the people they stole it from in the first place, helps families start over." Rebecca absorbed this, comparing it to the newspaper accounts that painted the Donovan gang as ruthless thieves. "Noble intentions don't make it legal," she pointed out. "Legal isn't always right." His voice carried the weight of old anger. The law protected the men who burned my family's ranch. The law lets companies steal land that's been in families for generations. The law looked away when 3 children died in the mining collapse because safety costs money. The vehemence in his tone silenced her momentarily. This wasn't just criminal bravado. This was a man driven by something deeper. "I'm not asking you to believe in what I do," he continued more quietly. "Just to understand that Cedar Valley exists because the world out here isn't as simple as lawful and lawless." Before she could respond, Eli whistled sharply from his position. At the meadow's edge, in an instant, Caleb's demeanor changed, tension rippling through his body as he signaled for silence. Rebecca froze, watching as Marcus moved swiftly to Sophia, helping her to her feet and toward the shelter of the trees. Caleb drew his pistol, moving with silent precision toward Eli. Rebecca hesitated only a moment before gathering her herbs and following Sophia. "Riders," Marcus whispered as she reached them, "coming up the east trail." From their position among the pines, Rebecca could see the meadow they'd just vacated. Caleb and Eli had disappeared from view, but the horses remained, grazing peacefully. 2 minutes of tense silence passed before the intruders appeared. 4 men on horseback, moving cautiously into the clearing. Even from a distance, Rebecca recognized Sheriff Wilson's distinctive gray hat. The men with him weren't his usual deputies. They wore long dusters despite the summer heat, and the way they carried themselves spoke of men comfortable with violence. "Bounty hunters," Marcus breathed, confirming her suspicion. Rebecca felt, Sophia tense beside her, clutching Joseph closer. The baby, sensing his mother's fear, began to whimper softly. Rebecca quickly placed a gentle hand over the tiny bundle, shushing softly, her eyes never leaving the scene in the meadow. The men dismounted, examining the ground and the still smoking remains of their small fire. The sheriff gestured toward the horses, clearly recognizing them. One of the bounty hunters began checking the saddlebags, while another followed tracks. Toward the spring. Rebecca's heart pounded so loudly she was certain they would hear it. The bounty hunter was heading directly toward their hiding place, eyes on the ground, following their trail with disturbing accuracy. 20 yards away. 15, 10, a whistle different from Eli's, sharper, sounded from the opposite side of the meadow. The bounty hunter's head snapped up, turning toward the sound. Another whistle, then the crack of a breaking branch. "Over there!" the sheriff called, and all 4 men drew their weapons, moving quickly toward the eastern edge of the clearing. As soon as the men's backs were turned, Marcus gripped Rebecca's arm. "Now!" he hissed, urging them deeper into the forest. They moved as quietly as possible, Sophia biting her lip against the pain of quick movement, Rebecca steadying her with a supporting arm. They'd gone perhaps 50 yards when a gunshot cracked through the air, followed by shouts and more gunfire. Sophia stumbled, panic in her eyes. Rebecca caught her, taking Joseph into her own arms to free Sophia's movement. "Keep going," Marcus ordered, drawing his own gun. "Follow the creek bed west. I'll catch up." Rebecca didn't argue, guiding Sophia forward as quickly as the new mother could manage. The forest floor was soft with pine needles, muffling their footsteps as they pushed through undergrowth toward the sound of running water. Behind them, the gunfire continued, sporadic but intense. They reached a shallow creek, its clear water rushing over smooth stones. Rebecca helped Sophia down the bank, wincing as the cold water soaked through her boots. They waded west, using the water to hide their tracks. Joseph remarkably quiet against Rebecca's chest, as if he sensed the danger. When Sophia began to falter, Rebecca guided her to a hollow beneath an overhanging bank, sheltered by the gnarled roots of an ancient pine. They huddled there, shivering despite the summer warmth, listening as the gunfire gradually ceased. Minutes stretched into an hour. The forest fell silent, except for birdsong cautiously resuming. Joseph began to fuss, hungry and uncomfortable. Sophia took him with trembling hands, loosening her blouse to nurse him. "What if they're dead?" she whispered, tears threatening. "Caleb, the others." Rebecca squeezed her shoulder. "Your brother strikes me as remarkably difficult to kill," she said with more confidence than she felt. "They led the men away from us deliberately. They'll find us when it's safe." Another hour passed. Sophia dozed fitfully, exhaustion claiming her despite the circumstances. Rebecca remained vigilant, straining to hear any approach. The sun began its westward descent, shadows lengthening through the trees. The snap of a twig brought her fully, alert, hand reaching for the small knife in her boot, her only weapon. She positioned herself in front of Sophia and the baby, heart racing. A low whistle, the same pattern Eli had used earlier, sounded nearby. Rebecca hesitated, unsure whether to respond. The whistle came again, closer. "Rebecca?" Caleb's voice, pitched low but unmistakable. Relief flooded through her. "Here," she called softly, "under the bank." Moments later, he appeared at the edge of the creek alone, a bloodied bandage wrapped hastily around his left arm. His face was drawn with pain, but his eyes warmed visibly when he saw them safe. "Sophia? The baby?" "Both well," Rebecca assured him, helping Sophia awaken gently. "But you're hurt." He dismissed this with a shake of his head, kneeling beside his sister. "We need to move. The others are bringing fresh horses. The sheriff and his men lost our trail, but they'll double back soon enough." Rebecca gestured to his arm. "Let me see that first." "Later. We don't have time." "We have 5 minutes," she insisted, already untying her apron to access the herbs she'd gathered. "An untreated wound will slow us more in the long run." Something like respect flickered in his eyes before he reluctantly extended his arm. Rebecca worked quickly, unwrapping the crude bandage to reveal a bullet graze, painful but not critical. She cleaned it with water from the creek, packed it with crushed yarrow to stop the bleeding, and wrapped it with a clean strip torn from her petticoat. "You've done this before," he observed, watching her efficient movements. "Too many times." She tied off the bandage securely. "Mining accidents, farming mishaps, occasionally bullet wounds when men drink too much and argue too hotly." His mouth quirked slightly. "Just another day's work for the town midwife?" "Former town midwife," she corrected, helping Sophia to her feet. "Currently an associate of Outlaws, apparently." Caleb actually smiled then, brief but genuine. "Currently under the protection of Outlaws," he amended. "There's a difference." They made their way carefully upstream to where Marcus and Eli waited, with 5 horses, their original mounts plus 1 additional. Both men bore signs of the confrontation, Eli with a bruised face, Marcus limping slightly, but they were alive and alert. "Sheriff?" Caleb asked tersely as they approached. "Heading back to town with one of his men wounded," Marcus reported. "The other 2 are still searching, but they're moving east, away from our route." Caleb nodded, helping Sophia mount with even more care than before. "We'll take the high pass instead of the cabin. Less comfortable but safer." Rebecca swallowed her dismay at the prospect of more difficult riding after the day's events. She approached her mare, gathering her strength to mount, when Caleb appeared at her side. "Ride with me," he said quietly. "You're exhausted, and my horse is stronger." Pride made her want to refuse, but practicality won out. She nodded, allowing him to help her onto his mount before he swung up behind her. The solid warmth of his chest against her back was both disconcerting and oddly reassuring. They rode through the deepening twilight, following a game trail so faint Rebecca would never have seen it without their guidance. The closeness of Caleb was impossible to ignore. His breathing, the occasional wince when the horse's movement jarred his wounded arm, the way he instinctively steadied her when fatigue made her sway. "Why did you really ask me to come?" she found herself asking as the first stars appeared above. "There must be other midwives, other healers you could have found." He was silent so long she thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was low near her ear. "Trust," he said simply. "You had every reason to turn us in, and you didn't. That's rare in my experience. So it's just about having a trustworthy midwife for your community." His chest rose and fell against her back in what might have been a silent laugh. "Is that not reason enough? Good healers willing to live beyond the reach of civilization are hard to find. And yet I sense there's more you're not saying." His arms tightened slightly around her as the horse negotiated a steep section of trail. "You remind me of someone," he admitted after another long pause. "Someone who also chose to help when it would have been easier not to." Before she could ask more, Eli signaled from ahead. They had reached the high pass, a narrow saddle between two peaks, exposed to the elements but offering a clear view of any approach. A stand of weather-beaten pines provided some shelter, and a small spring trickled from the rocks. They made camp with practiced efficiency. No fire tonight, too visible from a distance. Cold rations, minimal conversation. Sophia and Joseph were settled in the most protected spot, wrapped in every spare blanket. The men arranged a watch rotation, with Caleb insisting on taking the first, despite his injury. Rebecca, too tired to argue about anything, found herself a place among the pine roots, wrapping her woolen shawl tightly around her shoulders against the mountain chill. Sleep seemed impossible despite her exhaustion. Too much had happened, too much uncertainty lay ahead. She watched as Eli and Marcus settled nearby, while Caleb climbed to a rock outcropping with a clear view of the trail below. After an hour of restless discomfort, Rebecca gave up on sleep. She rose quietly, checking on Sophia and Joseph, before making her way to where Caleb kept watch. He glanced up as she approached, unsurprised by her presence. "You should be resting." "So should you," she countered, noting the tension in his posture that betrayed his pain. "Your arm needs proper tending." "It's held this long." She sat beside him on the rock, drawing her shawl closer. "I'm a poor excuse for a doctor if I let my only patient with a bullet wound ignore treatment." That almost smile again. "Your only patient at the moment," he corrected. "There will be plenty waiting in Cedar Valley." Rebecca looked out over the moonlit landscape, the dark shapes of mountains against the star-filled sky. "Tell me about this place you've created." Caleb shifted, stretching his injured arm carefully. "It started with just a few families, people who'd lost everything and had nowhere else to go. A widow and her children from a farm. The bank seized, a miner blacklisted for speaking up about unsafe conditions. My sister, after her husband was killed in a dispute with cattle rustlers. And you protect them." "We help them protect themselves," he clarified. "Everyone contributes, everyone learns to be self-sufficient. We trade with friendly tribes for what we can't make or grow. When necessary, we redistribute resources from those who've taken unfairly." "The banks," Rebecca said, understanding dawning. "Among others." He looked at her directly. "I won't pretend what we do is legal, but it's just..." The conviction in his voice was impossible to dismiss. Whatever else Caleb Donovan might be, he believed completely in his cause. Rebecca found herself wondering what it would be like to have such certainty, to draw such a clear line between right and wrong, when her own life had taught her that most truths existed in shades of grey. "May I see your arm now?" she asked, changing the subject. This time, he didn't resist, carefully removing his coat to give her access to the bandage. It had bled through in places, but held well enough. Rebecca unwrapped it gently, using the moonlight to examine the wound. "Clean. Entry and exit," she observed with professional detachment. "You were lucky. Skill more than luck," he replied, watching her face rather than her hands. "I've learned to move when I see the trigger finger twitch." Rebecca shook her head slightly, dampening a clean cloth with water from her canteen to bathe the wound. a skill most people never need to develop. Most people haven't been shot at as often as I have. The casualness of his tone made her look up, meeting eyes that had seen more violence than anyone should. For a moment, she glimpsed vulnerability beneath his controlled exterior. The constant vigilance, the responsibility for so many lives, the knowledge that a single mistake could be fatal. "This life you've chosen," she said quietly, applying fresh herbs to the wound. "Do you ever wonder about the cost?" Caleb was still for a long moment. "Every day," he finally said. But the alternative was watching more people suffer while those with power prospered from their misery. I couldn't live with that. Rebecca wrapped the clean bandage around his arm, her fingers brushing his skin. He was warm despite the mountain, chill, solid and real in a world that had become increasingly dreamlike since she'd left Pine Creek. "There," she said, securing the bandage. "Try to avoid getting shot again if you can manage it." His mouth curved into an actual smile, this time transforming his face. "I'll do my best, though having a skilled healer nearby might make me less cautious." The teasing note in his voice caught her off guard. This was a different Caleb than the stern outlaw leader she'd seen thus far. A glimpse of the man he might have been in another life. A soft cry from Joseph broke the moment. Rebecca moved immediately toward the sound, professional instincts taking over. She found Sophia awake, trying to soothe the fussing infant. "He feels warm," Sophia whispered worriedly. Rebecca took the baby, her experienced hands gentle but thorough in her examination. Joseph's skin was indeed warmer than it should be, his tiny face flushed. The rapid change in altitude, the stress of travel, the cold night air, any could have affected his fragile system. "We need to keep him warm and make sure he nurses frequently," Rebecca instructed, helping position the baby at Sophia's breast. "I'll make a pine needle tea in the morning. The vitamin content will help strengthen both of you." "Is he going to be all right?" Sophia's voice trembled with exhaustion and fear. Rebecca squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Babies are remarkably resilient, and this one has already proven himself a fighter, but we should try to reach shelter tomorrow if possible." Caleb had followed, standing a respectful distance away, but clearly concerned. Rebecca approached him, keeping her voice low. "We need to get them somewhere warm and dry by tomorrow night," she said without preamble. "The baby has a slight fever. Nothing serious yet, but the conditions up here aren't helping." He nodded. Decision made instantly. "There's a trading post about 6 hours from here. Not as secluded as I'd like, but they know me and won't ask questions. They have proper beds, a stove." "That would be better," Rebecca agreed, relief evident in her voice. "Get some rest," he said, gesturing to where she'd abandoned her makeshift bed. "I'll wake you if Joseph's condition changes." She hesitated, medical responsibility warring with physical exhaustion. "Wake me in 2 hours regardless. I want to check him again." Caleb's expression softened slightly. "You have my word." This time, when Rebecca settled among the pine roots, sleep found her almost immediately, her body surrendering to fatigue despite the hard ground and cool air. Her last conscious thought was that for someone who had spent years being self-sufficient, she had very quickly come to rely on the word of an outlaw. True to his promise, Caleb woke her 2 hours later. Joseph's condition remained stable, not better, but not worse either. Rebecca prepared a mild infusion from her herbs, helping Sophia take a few sips before nursing to pass the medicinal properties through her milk. The remainder of the night passed in this pattern, short periods of sleep interrupted by careful monitoring of the infant. By dawn, Rebecca was exhausted but satisfied that Joseph wasn't deteriorating. Sophia, however, looked alarmingly pale, the exertion of the previous day and the sleepless night taking their toll. They broke camp as the first light touched the eastern peaks. Caleb arranged for Sophia to ride with Marcus, who was the steadiest horseman among them, Joseph securely cradled against her chest. Rebecca found herself once again on Caleb's mount, too tired to even consider pride as an issue. The descent from the high pass was steep, the trail barely visible in places. Caleb guided his horse with minimal movement, one arm around Rebecca to steady her, the other holding the reins. She found herself leaning into his strength, her body aching from the previous day's exertions. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked, noting the shadows beneath his eyes. "Enough," he replied, which she took to mean very little. "You need rest as much as any of us. An exhausted leader makes poor decisions." She felt rather than saw his faint smile. "Are you always this forthright with men who carry guns?" "Only the ones who've been shot and refuse proper care," she retorted, then softened her tone. "I mean it, Caleb. You're responsible for all these people. That includes taking care of yourself." He was quiet for a moment, guiding the horse around a particularly treacherous bend before responding. "It's been a long time since anyone concerned themselves with my well-being." Something in his voice, a hint of surprise, perhaps even vulnerability, made Rebecca's heart twist unexpectedly. She was saved from responding by Eli, signaling from ahead. They had reached more level ground, the forest thickening around them as they left the rocky highlands. Their pace quickened as the terrain improved. Rebecca watched Sophia carefully, noting her increasing fatigue and the way she clutched Joseph. With what seemed to be her last reserves of strength, they needed to reach shelter soon. By mid-morning, the trading post came into view, a sturdy log structure nestled in a small clearing beside a rushing stream. Smoke curled from its stone chimney, promising warmth within. A weathered sign reading "Fuller's Trading" hung above the door, swinging slightly in the mountain breeze. "Wait here," Caleb instructed, dismounting and handing the reins to Rebecca. He approached the building alone, scanning the surroundings with practiced vigilance before knocking a distinctive pattern on the heavy wooden door. A moment later, it swung open to reveal a broad-shouldered man with a silver-streaked beard. He clasped Caleb's arm in greeting, their conversation too distant for Rebecca to hear. The trader glanced toward their group, nodded once, then stepped aside to allow Caleb entry. 5 tense minutes passed before Caleb re-emerged, gesturing them forward. Marcus helped Sophia dismount, supporting her as she swayed with exhaustion. Rebecca slid from the horse, wincing as her stiff muscles protested the movement. "Fuller's an old friend," Caleb explained quietly as they approached. "He's agreed to let us stay in the back rooms. His wife Martha will help with whatever you need for Sophia and the baby." The interior of the trading post was surprisingly spacious, the main room lined with shelves of supplies, from ammunition to fabric, dried goods to tools. A pot-bellied stove dominated the center, radiating blessed heat. The trader's wife, a sturdy woman with kind eyes and capable hands, appeared from a back room, immediately assessing Sophia's condition with a glance. "This way, dear," she said, taking Sophia's arm. "I've got a bed warming and some broth on the stove." Rebecca followed, carrying Joseph. The baby was still too warm, his breathing slightly rapid. The back room was simple but clean, with an iron bed covered in patchwork quilts and a small window allowing natural light. "You're the midwife?" Martha asked, helping Sophia settle onto the bed. Rebecca nodded. "The baby was born 4 days ago, slightly premature. He's developed a mild fever during our journey." Martha clicked her tongue sympathetically. "Poor little mite. I've raised 6 children of my own. What do you need for him?" Relief washed through Rebecca at finding such an ally. "Clean water, fresh linens. If you have any catnip or elderflower for tea, that would help reduce his fever gently. I've got both dried in the storeroom, and you'll want a proper wash basin, clean clothes for both of them." Martha efficiently listed the items, already moving to gather them. "There's a bathing room through that door with heated water. You look like you could use it yourself after you've tended to them. The suggestion of a real bath nearly brought tears to Rebecca's tired eyes. Thank you, she managed, beginning to unwrap Joseph for a more thorough examination. For the next hour, Rebecca worked alongside Martha, washing the baby in lukewarm water to help reduce his fever, preparing herbal infusions, helping Sophia bathe and change into a clean nightgown Martha provided. By the time they finished, Sophia was sleeping soundly in the freshly made bed, and Joseph, while still feverish, was nursing more vigorously. "You've done this before," Rebecca observed, watching Martha expertly swaddle the baby after his bath. The older woman smiled. "As I said, 6 of my own, and I've helped birth most of the children in this region over the past 30 years. Not many doctors willing to come this far into the mountains. You're a midwife too, among other things." Martha handed the bundled infant back to Rebecca. "Trading postwife, fur cleaner, occasional gunshot mender, depending on who comes through. Outdoor." Rebecca settled Joseph beside his sleeping mother. "And you don't mind helping fugitives?" Martha's expression grew serious. "Caleb Donovan has done more for the people in these mountains than any lawman ever bothered to. When the mining company poisoned the river and the children in the lower valley started dying, it wasn't the sheriff who brought in a doctor and clean water. When winter came early 3 years ago and the passes closed, it wasn't the territorial government that delivered food to the isolated homesteads." The fierce loyalty in her voice gave Rebecca pause. This was the second time she'd heard Caleb described as protector rather than criminal. "Get some rest yourself," Martha continued in a gentler tone. "There's another room prepared for you. I'll watch over these two for a while." Too exhausted to argue, Rebecca allowed herself to be guided to a smaller adjoining room. A copper tub, filled with steaming water, waited beside a folding screen. Clean towels and a simple cotton dress laid out on a narrow bed. "My daughter's dress from before she married and moved to Denver," Martha explained. "Should fit well enough while we wash your things." Left alone, Rebecca sank into the bath with a sigh that came from her very soul. The hot water eased muscles she hadn't realized were aching, washing away days of dust and worry. She closed her eyes, allowing herself this moment of pure physical relief. She must have dozed off briefly, for the water had cooled when a soft knock at the door roused her. Quickly wrapping herself in a towel, she called, "Yes? It's Martha. I've brought some food if you're decent." Rebecca hastily donned the offered dress, simple blue cotton, slightly large but clean and soft with washing, before opening the door. Martha entered with a tray bearing a bowl of stew, fresh bread, and a steaming cup of tea. "Eat, then sleep," the older woman instructed. "Doctor's orders." Rebecca smiled gratefully. "Are you the doctor now? In these parts, we're all whatever we need to be." Martha patted her shoulder. "Sophia and the little one are resting comfortably. The men are keeping watch. You've done your part for now." The stew was hearty and flavorful, the bread still, warm from the oven. Rebecca hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first bite touched her lips. She ate quickly, the combination of good food, warm bath, and bone-deep exhaustion making her eyelids grow heavy. She barely remembered setting the empty bowl aside before sleep claimed her completely. When Rebecca woke, sunlight no longer filtered through the small window. Instead, a lantern burned low on the bedside table, casting golden shadows across unfamiliar walls. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was or how she'd gotten there. Then it all rushed back. Pine Creek, Caleb, the journey, Joseph's fever. She sat up quickly, her body protesting the sudden movement. How long had she slept? She needed to check on Sophia and the baby. The dress Martha had lent her was wrinkled from sleep, but would have to do. Rebecca straightened it as best she could, finger-combing her unruly hair before hurrying to the adjoining room. The larger bedroom was empty. the bed neatly made. Alarm shot through her until she heard soft voices from the main room of the trading post. Following the sound, she found Sophia seated in a rocking chair near the stove, Joseph in her arms. Martha stood nearby, stirring something in a pot that filled the air with a fragrant herbal scent. Both women looked up as Rebecca entered. "There she is," Martha said warmly. 16 hours of sleep by my count. You needed it." 16 hours. Rebecca looked from one woman to the other in disbelief. "Why didn't you wake me, Joseph?" "Has been well cared for," Sophia assured her, shifting to reveal the baby's face. "His fever broke this morning. Martha's remedies worked beautifully." Relief washed through Rebecca as she approached, laying a gentle hand on Joseph's forehead. His skin was blessedly cool, his color healthier than it had been since their departure. He blinked up at her with dark eyes that seemed more alert than before. "You're looking better yourself," she told Sophia, noting the improved color in the young mother's cheeks. "The rest has done you good. Martha's cooking has done me better," Sophia replied with a small smile, "and not having to ride horseback up mountain trails." "How long are we staying?" Rebecca asked, accepting a cup of the herbal tea Martha offered. "Another day at least," Martha answered. "Caleb wants Sophia and the little ones strong enough for the final leg of the journey. Cedar Valley is still a full day's ride from here." Rebecca sipped the tea, chamomile and mint, soothing and restorative. "Where are the men?" "Fuller took them hunting this morning. They'll be back by sundown." Martha gestured to the window, where Rebecca could see the first purple tinge of twilight touching the mountain peaks. "Should be any time now." As if summoned by her words, the front door opened. Fuller entered first, followed by Marcus and Eli, each carrying several rabbits, strung on twine. Caleb came last, a young deer draped across his shoulders. Despite the weight of his burden, he moved with the same fluid grace Rebecca had observed before. The wound on his arm didn't seem to be hampering him. His eyes found hers immediately, a flash of something like relief crossing his features before his expression returned to its usual watchfulness. "You're up," he said, depositing the deer on Fuller's work table. "Feeling better?" "Much," she admitted, "though I didn't intend to sleep an entire day away." "Your body decides what it needs," Martha said firmly, already examining the game. The men had brought. "This will make a fine stew, with plenty to smoke and take with you. Sophia, let's get you and the baby back to bed while I prepare supper." Rebecca watched as Martha shepherded Sophia toward the back rooms, efficiency in every movement. The older woman was not to be argued with, it seemed. Fuller and Caleb's men set about dressing the game outside, leaving Rebecca alone with Caleb. In the main room of the trading post, he washed his hands in a basin near the door, the movement revealing a fresh stain of blood on his shirt sleeve. "You've opened your wound again," she observed, medical instincts overriding any awkwardness. He glanced at his arm dismissively. "It's nothing. That's what men always say right before infection sets in." She approached, gesturing to his sleeve. "Let me see." For a moment she thought he might refuse, but then he sighed and began rolling up the bloodied fabric. "Your bedside manner could use some work, midwife." "I save my gentle touch for those who aren't stubborn fools," she retorted, examining the reopened gash. The edges were inflamed but clean, the bleeding already slowed to a seep. "You'll live, though you're lucky. A few inches to the right and we'd be having a very different conversation. Wouldn't be the first time luck kept me breathing." He watched her face as she gently probed the wound. "Martha says you're a fine healer. High praise coming from her." Rebecca felt a flush of pleasure at the compliment. "She's remarkable herself. I've learned several new herbal combinations just watching her work with Joseph. The Fullers have been tending to folks in these mountains for 30 years. No formal training, just practical knowledge passed down and hard-earned experience." He winced slightly as she cleaned the wound with a cloth dampened in witch hazel. "Rather like you, I imagine." My grandmother trained with a doctor in Boston. Before coming west, Rebecca corrected. She believed in combining traditional remedies with modern medical knowledge. And you? What do you believe in? The question caught her off guard, both in its directness and the genuine interest in his tone. I believe in using whatever works, she said after a moment. Scientific understanding when available, traditional wisdom when necessary. The body often knows how to heal itself if given the proper support. Practical approach, he nodded approvingly. Cedar Valley could use more of that thinking. She finished cleaning the wound, applying a fresh salve Martha had provided. This mysterious Cedar Valley of yours sounds increasingly like more than just a hideout for outlaws. A faint smile touched his lips. Perhaps you'll have to see it for yourself before passing judgment. I'm already headed there, aren't I? Unless you've changed your mind about wanting a midwife who speaks her mind too freely. His expression grew more serious. No, if anything, the journey has confirmed you're exactly what we need. The intensity in his gaze made her fingers falter briefly as she wrapped the fresh bandage. There, she said, securing the wrapping. Try to avoid wrestling with any more deer until that's properly healed. He flexed his arm experimentally. I'll do my best. The door opened again as Fuller returned, breaking the moment between them. Meat's dressed and ready for Martha's cooking, the trader announced. Caleb, a word about those supplies we discussed? The two men moved toward the back of the trading post, leaving Rebecca alone. She found herself drawn to the window, watching, as twilight deepened over the mountain landscape. How strange that just 3 days ago she had been in Pine Creek, living a life that already felt distant and insubstantial compared to the intensity of this journey. Had she been right to leave? The question surfaced periodically, usually when exhaustion lowered her defenses. She had abandoned her clinic, her few patients, the life she'd built after her husband's death, to follow an outlaw into the wilderness based on a moment's decision and a baby delivered during a robbery. And yet, something about this path felt more right than anything had in years. Perhaps it was simply that she was needed, truly needed, in a way Pine Creek had never allowed. Dr. Porter had seen to that, gradually undermining her practice with his talk of outdated methods and women's nervous constitutions. The women who had once trusted her with their most vulnerable moments had turned elsewhere, leaving Rebecca with only the poorest, most desperate cases. Here, in just days, she had saved lives, made decisions that mattered, been valued for her knowledge rather than dismissed for her gender. The sound of returning footsteps pulled her from her reflections. Martha bustled in with a steaming pot, followed by Fuller carrying a large cast-iron skillet. Rabbit stew and cornbread, Martha announced. Rebecca, be a dear and help me set the table. The men will be in shortly, and Sophia's feeling well, enough to join us. The next hour passed in surprising domesticity. The trading post's main room transformed into a dining area, with Fuller and Martha moving with the synchronized efficiency of a couple who had shared such tasks for decades. Sophia emerged from the back room, Joseph sleeping peacefully in a makeshift cradle Fuller had apparently constructed during the day. Eli and Marcus joined them, their usual watchfulness tempered by the safety of the trading post and the promise of a hot meal. Rebecca found herself between Sophia and Martha at the long wooden table, with Caleb seated directly across from her. The food was simple but delicious. Rabbit stew rich with wild mushrooms and roots Martha had gathered, cornbread, dripping with honey from Fuller's hives, preserved peaches from last summer's harvest. The conversation flowed more easily than Rebecca would have expected. Fuller shared news of the territories, keeping them informed of events they had missed during their journey. Martha asked thoughtful questions about Sophia's health and Joseph's progress. offering practical advice without being intrusive. Even Marcus and Eli contributed, sharing a humorous story about a bear they'd encountered on a previous journey. Throughout the meal, Rebecca was aware of Caleb watching her, not obviously, but with quiet attention to her reactions, her comfort level. He spoke little himself, but his presence anchored the gathering, his occasional smile transforming his usually guarded features into something softer, more approachable. "Tomorrow we'll prepare provisions for the final leg of your journey," Fuller was saying as they finished the meal. "The path to Cedar Valley should be clear this time of year, but it's always wise to be prepared. We've already imposed on your hospitality too much," Caleb began, but Martha cut him off with a wave of her hand. "Nonsense. Friends are never an imposition. Besides, that little one needs another day of rest before facing the trail again." Rebecca couldn't argue with Martha's assessment. While Joseph was improving rapidly, another day in warm, clean surroundings would only strengthen him for the journey ahead. As the meal concluded, Martha shooed everyone from the table. "Fuller, and I will clean up. Sophia, you should rest while the baby's sleeping. The rest of you, enjoy the evening. It's been too long since we've had company." Rebecca helped clear the dishes, despite Martha's protests, then found herself at loose ends. The trading post, while spacious for a mountain outpost, offered limited privacy. Sophia had returned to the back room with Joseph. Marcus and Eli sat with Fuller near the stove, discussing hunting routes and weather patterns. Caleb had disappeared outside. Feeling suddenly restless, Rebecca wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, another loan from Martha, and stepped onto the trading post's small porch. The night air was crisp with approaching autumn, the sky ablaze with more stars than she had ever seen in Pine Creek. A small clearing stretched before the building, giving way to pine forest silhouetted against the starlight. She found Caleb leaning against a post at the edge of the porch, smoking a hand-rolled cigarette. He glanced over as she approached, the orange ember brightening briefly as he inhaled. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "I've had enough sleep for now," she replied, drawing the shawl tighter against the evening chill. "Besides, the stars are beautiful here." He followed her gaze upward. Clearer in the mountains. No town lights, no coal smoke. "We had stars in Pine Creek, but nothing like this." She leaned against the porch railing, drinking in the vastness above them. "It makes a person feel small, or part of something larger." He tapped ash from his cigarette. "Depends on how you look at it." Rebecca studied his profile, strong and weathered in the starlight. "You're not what I expected, Caleb Donovan." A faint smile touched his lips. "What did you expect? The bloodthirsty outlaw from the wanted posters?" "Something like that," she admitted. "Not someone who creates safe havens for displaced families and delivers food during harsh winters. People contain multitudes, Rebecca Miller, even outlaws." He turned to face her fully. "Even proper town midwives who decide to ride off with criminals." The gentle teasing in his tone made her smile despite herself. "There was nothing proper about me, according to Pine Creek. Too educated for a woman, too independent, too willing to question Dr. Porter's pronouncements." "Their loss," he said simply. The quiet sincerity in those two words warmed her more than any elaborate compliment could have. They stood in companionable silence, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead until Joseph's cry from inside broke the spell. "I should check on them," Rebecca said, reluctant to end the peaceful moment but drawn by professional responsibility. Caleb nodded. "Get some rest. Tomorrow Martha will outfit you with proper riding clothes. The final stretch to Cedar Valley is challenging terrain." "Good night, then." She turned toward the door, then paused. "Thank you." "For what?" "For asking me to come. I'm not sure yet if it was the right decision, but it feels purposeful. I've missed that feeling." His expression softened in the starlight. "Good night, Rebecca." Inside, she found Sophia already attending to Joseph, whose cries had settled to whimpers. A quick examination showed his temperature remained normal, his earlier distress likely, just hunger or discomfort from an overdue changing. Rebecca helped settle them both, singing a soft lullaby her grandmother had taught her until both mother and child drifted back to sleep. In her own small room, Rebecca lay awake longer than she intended, her mind too active for sleep. Tomorrow they would leave this unexpected sanctuary and continue to Cedar Valley, a place she had only heard described in fragments. A community, built outside the law, but apparently governed by principles of protection and fairness. What would her life be there? Would she find the purpose she sought, the respect for her skills that Pine Creek had gradually stripped away? Or was she simply exchanging one form of isolation for another, pinning too many hopes on Caleb Donovan's vision of justice? She had no answers, only questions that circled like the stars outside her window, bright but distant. Eventually, physical tiredness overcame mental restlessness, and she slipped into a dreamless sleep. Morning brought organized activity as the Fullers helped prepare for their departure. True to Caleb's word, Martha presented Rebecca with practical riding clothes, sturdy brown trousers, a flannel shirt, and a leather vest, all previously belonging to their daughter. "These will serve you better on the trail than that dress," Martha said practically. "And there's a good winter coat packed in your saddlebags. The nights get cold in the high country, even in summer." Rebecca changed gratefully, surprised at how comfortable the masculine attire felt. The trousers allowed freer movement than she'd ever experienced in skirts, the flannel shirt soft against her skin after washing. When she emerged, Fuller was loading provisions onto their horses: smoked meat, dried fruit, hard biscuits, medical supplies. Everything methodically arranged for easy access during the journey. Sophia appeared in similar practical attire, Joseph securely wrapped against her chest in a sling Martha had fashioned. "The colors returning to your cheeks," Rebecca observed, pleased with her patient's progress. "How do you feel about riding today?" "Stronger," Sophia replied with determination, and eager to show Joseph his new home. Caleb conferred with Fuller over maps spread across the trading post's counter, their heads bent together as they discussed routes and landmarks. His injured arm appeared to be healing well, his movements no longer favoring it as noticeably. By mid-morning, they were ready to depart. Martha pressed additional bundles into Rebecca's hands: dried herbs, special teas for Sophia's recovery, a small jar of honey for Joseph if he developed a cough. "You have a natural gift," the older woman told her quietly. "These mountains need healers like you. Don't hesitate to send word if you require anything I might provide." Rebecca embraced her warmly. "Thank you for everything. I've learned much in just 2 days." "Knowledge is meant to be shared," Martha replied, "especially out here where it can mean the difference between life and death." Fuller clasped hands with each of them, his farewell to Caleb lingering with a sense of brotherhood that spoke of shared history. "Keep to the western ridge," he advised. "The eastern trail had a rock slide last month. Hasn't been fully cleared." They set off as the morning mist still clung to the valleys below, their small procession winding away from the trading post and into deeper wilderness. Rebecca rode beside Sophia, keeping watchful eyes on both mother and child, while Caleb led and his men guarded their flanks. The day's journey took them higher into the mountains, through stands of ancient pine and across small, crystal-clear streams. The air grew thinner, scented with resin and wildflowers, the silence broken only by birdsong and the steady rhythm of hooves against rocky soil. By midday, they had reached a high plateau, offering breathtaking views of the surrounding peaks. Purple-gray mountains extended in all directions, mist clinging to their valleys, white-capped summits piercing the azure sky. Rebecca reined in her horse, momentarily overwhelmed by the majesty before her. "It's beautiful," she breathed, more to herself than anyone else. Caleb had paused beside her, his gaze following hers across the landscape. "This is what they're trying to claim," he said quietly. "Railroad companies, mining interests, cattle, and barons. They see resources to exploit, not beauty to preserve." They made camp that evening in a sheltered hollow, protected from the wind by towering granite formations. After 2 nights of vigilant caution, the atmosphere was notably more relaxed. They were deep in wilderness now, far from any likely pursuit, and Caleb permitted a small fire that cast dancing shadows against the stone walls surrounding them. Rebecca prepared a special tea for Sophia using Martha's herbs, pleased to see the young mother growing stronger with each passing day. Joseph slept peacefully, his fever completely gone, tiny face serene in the firelight. Eli had managed to shoot 2 grouse during their journey, which now roasted over the flames, filling the air with a tantalizing aroma. "We're making good time," Caleb observed, spreading Fuller's map across a flat rock. "Should reach Cedar Valley by tomorrow afternoon if the weather holds." Rebecca watched as he traced their route with a calloused finger, noting the confidence in his movements. He seemed different here in the wilderness, more at ease, less guarded, the outlaw leader giving way to the mountain man. "How many people live in this valley of yours?" she asked, settling beside the fire with a cup of tea. "Nearly 60 now," he replied, folding the map carefully. "Started with just 12 of us 3 years ago. Word spreads among those who need refuge." 60 people hidden away in the mountains. Rebecca marveled. "How have you managed to keep such a place secret?" Marcus spoke up from across the fire. "Location helps. The valley's surrounded by peaks on 3 sides, with a single defensible pass. Unless you know exactly where to look, you'd ride right past it. And those who do find it generally have reason to keep its existence private," Caleb added. "People come to Cedar Valley because they've been failed by the world outside. They have no loyalty to the systems that abandoned them." Rebecca considered, this warming her hands around her cup. "And you govern them, make the rules." Something like amusement flickered across Caleb's face. "We tried that at first. Didn't work well. Now decisions are made by council, 7 people elected by the community. I only lead the security efforts and supply runs." "Democracy in an outlaw settlement," Rebecca murmured, intrigued despite her lingering skepticism. "Who would have thought? Works better than what passes for democracy in most frontier towns," Eli commented. "No bribes, no railroad money buying votes, just people deciding what's best for their community." The conversation continued as they ate, with Caleb and his men sharing stories of Cedar Valley that gradually built a clearer picture in Rebecca's mind. Gardens and orchards, a schoolhouse for the children, shared responsibility for defense, and hunting, trade arrangements with friendly indigenous tribes. It sounded almost utopian, yet their matter-of-fact descriptions contained none of the zealous fervor she might have expected from true believers in a perfect society. "We have our problems," Sophia acknowledged when Rebecca expressed this thought. "Disagreements over resources, people who don't pull their weight, occasional troublemakers. We're still human after all." "But we work through it together," Marcus added, "and everyone understands what's at stake if we fail." As the fire burned down to embers and the others prepared for sleep, Rebecca found herself contemplating this vision of community they described. Her life in Pine Creek had been increasingly isolated, respected for her skills at first, then gradually marginalized as Dr. Porter's influence grew. The connection she felt with patients had been one of her few joys, and even that had diminished as fewer women sought her services. Could she find true purpose in this hidden valley, among people living outside society's boundaries, but apparently striving to create something better than what they'd left behind? Rebecca arranged her bedroll near Sophia and Joseph, the familiar routine of checking on her patients one last time. providing comfort amid so much uncertainty. The baby slept soundly, his breathing clear and even. Sophia was already drifting off, exhaustion from the day's ride claiming her despite the hard ground beneath them. "Sleep well," Rebecca whispered, tucking the blanket more securely around mother and child before seeking her own rest. Later, she couldn't say what woke her, perhaps a sound just below the threshold of conscious hearing, or simply the instincts of someone who had lived most of her life alert to midnight calls for medical assistance. The fire had burned to ash, the moon high overhead casting silver light across the encampment. Her companions slept peacefully, except for the solitary figure sitting some distance away, silhouetted against the night sky. Caleb. Rebecca hesitated, then quietly rose, wrapping her blanket around her shoulders against the mountain chill. He didn't turn as she approached, though she knew he must have heard her movement. "Unable to sleep?" she asked softly, settling beside him on a flat rock overlooking the valley below. "Someone needs to keep watch," he replied, though his posture suggested contemplation rather than vigilance. "I thought we were past the dangerous territory." A faint smile touched his lips, visible in the moonlight. "You're never completely safe in this life, Rebecca." She considered this, drawing her blanket tighter. "Is that why you created Cedar Valley? To find whatever safety is possible?" He was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "I created it because I was tired of watching good people suffer while those who hurt them prospered." He turned slightly toward her. "After our ranch burned and my father died, Sophia and I tried living by the rules. We went to the courts, showed them evidence that the railroad men had set the fire. The judge was in their pocket, case dismissed without a hearing." Rebecca felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. "I'm sorry. We tried working, saving to start over. I took jobs at the mines, then with cattle drives, honest work for barely enough to survive. Meanwhile, the men who destroyed our home built mansions in Denver, with the money they made from land stolen from families like ours." His voice remained level, but she could hear the controlled anger beneath the surface. "When Sophia's husband was killed, shot in the back by rustlers hired by the same cattle company that wanted his water rights, something in me broke. Not in a wild way, in a clear way. And you turned outlaw. I turned toward justice when the law failed to provide it." He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of agitation. "I don't expect you to approve. Few respectable people would. I delivered a baby during a robbery and then rode off with the outlaws," Rebecca reminded him with gentle irony. "My credentials for respectability may be somewhat compromised." That earned a genuine smile, transforming his face in the moonlight. "True enough, though I suspect you've always had an independent streak that Pine Creek found challenging." She laughed softly. "My husband used to say I was born asking inconvenient questions. It didn't endear me to the town fathers." "What happened to him?" Caleb asked, "if you don't mind my asking." "Pneumonia, 2 winters ago." Rebecca looked up at the star-filled sky, the familiar ache of loss present, but dulled by time. "He was a good man in many ways, conventional but kind. He built my clinic for me, supported my work when others raised eyebrows. But there were parts of me he never fully understood." "The questioning parts?" She nodded. "David believed in order, in systems. He couldn't comprehend why I might challenge Dr. Porter's methods or suggest alternatives to the sheriff's heavy-handed treatment of the mining camp workers. He loved me, but I think he always hoped marriage would settle me." "Did it?" "For a while I tried," she admitted. "After he died, I gradually found my voice again. Not that it did me much good in Pine Creek. The town had already decided what a widow should be, dignified, reserved, grateful for whatever place society allowed her. And instead, they got you, Caleb observed with what sounded like admiration. Rebecca smiled ruefully. Instead, they got a woman who argued with the doctor in public and treated Shoshone patients when they came to her door. Scandalous behavior. Clearly, they sat in companionable silence for a time. The vast wilderness spread before them, stars wheeling overhead. Rebecca was struck by how comfortable this felt, sharing confidences with a man she had known less than a week, a man whose life existed outside the law, yet whose principles resonated with her own unspoken beliefs about justice and community. "Dawn comes early in the mountains," Caleb finally said, noting the eastern sky's faintest lightening. "You should try to get more sleep before we ride. So should you. I'm accustomed to little sleep." "That doesn't make it healthy," she countered, medical instincts rising to the surface. "Even outlaw leaders need rest to function properly." His mouth quirked in amusement. "Is that your professional opinion, Midwife?" "It is," she replied firmly, "along with my observation that your wound won't heal properly without adequate rest." Caleb shook his head, but there was no irritation in the gesture. "You're a stubborn woman, Rebecca Miller." "So I've been told. Frequently." She stood, adjusting, her blanket around her shoulders. "I'll make you a deal. I'll sleep if you will." He looked up at her, amusement and something deeper in his expression. "Very well. I'll wake Eli for the watch and get some rest." True to his word, Caleb roused Eli with a quiet word before settling on his own bedroll not far from where Rebecca had arranged hers. She watched through half-closed eyes as he removed his boots and gun belt, placing the weapon within easy reach before stretching out beneath his blanket. The last thing she remembered before sleep reclaimed her was the strangely comforting presence of him nearby, solid and real, in a world that had become increasingly dreamlike since she'd left Pine Creek behind. Morning brought clear skies and a sense of anticipation as they broke camp. Today they would reach Cedar Valley, this hidden community that had begun to take shape in Rebecca's imagination through stories and fragments of description. She found herself both eager and apprehensive to see the reality. The trail grew more challenging as they ascended, winding through steep passes where the horses picked their way carefully over loose shale. By midday they had reached what appeared to be an impassable wall of rock, the path seemingly ending in a tumble of boulders. "This is it?" Rebecca asked, confused. Caleb nodded, dismounting. "The entrance is concealed, one of the valley's natural defenses." He led his horse toward what looked like solid rock face, then disappeared suddenly into what Rebecca now realized was a cleverly disguised gap, a narrow passage barely wide enough for a horse and rider to pass through single file. The others followed, with Rebecca bringing up the rear. The passage twisted between towering walls of granite, sometimes so narrow that her knees brushed the rock on either side. Sunlight filtered down in broken shafts, creating an otherworldly play of light and shadow. After several hundred yards, the way began to widen, the light growing stronger ahead. And then, all at once, they emerged into Cedar Valley. Rebecca reined in her horse, momentarily stunned by the vista before her. The valley stretched perhaps 3 miles long and a mile wide, cradled between mountain peaks that surrounded it like protective sentinels. A clear stream meandered through its center, bordered by stands of aspen and pine. Meadows of wildflowers gave way to orderly fields where crops grew in neat rows. And nestled throughout were cabins, some clustered together, others standing. Apart, thin columns of smoke rising from stone chimneys. "It's beautiful," she breathed, taking in the unexpected scale and order of what she had imagined as a crude hideout. Caleb had waited for her, watching her reaction with something like pride. "Home," he said simply. As they descended the gentle slope into the valley, Rebecca noticed details she hadn't first observed. A water wheel turning steadily beside what appeared to be a mill, Children playing outside a larger building that must be the schoolhouse, a corral where several horses grazed peacefully. And people working in the fields, carrying water from the stream, mending roofs, all pausing in their tasks to wave as the riders approached. Not the desperate fugitives she had perhaps expected, but men and women going about the ordinary business of community life. They rode toward a cluster of larger buildings near the center of the valley. People began to gather, clearly having spotted their approach. By the time they reached what appeared to be a central meeting area, a small crowd had assembled. Women, children, old men, all regarding them with open curiosity and welcome. A gray-haired woman stepped forward as they dismounted, her weathered face breaking into a smile as she embraced Sophia. "Thank God you're safe," she said, before carefully peering at the bundle against Sophia's chest. "And this must be the little one, born on the trail we heard." "Born during a bank robbery, actually," Sophia replied with a tired smile. "Thanks to Rebecca here." All eyes turned to Rebecca, who suddenly felt intensely conscious of her travel-worn appearance and borrowed men's clothing. "This is Rebecca Miller," Caleb announced, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "Midwife, healer, and the reason. Sophia and Joseph made it here safely. She's agreed to join our community." A murmur of approval ran through the assembly. The gray-haired woman approached, taking Rebecca's hands in a warm grip. "I'm Ruth Carson, the closest thing we have to a doctor here. Your skills are sorely needed, especially with 3 women expecting in the next few months." Rebecca felt a surprising surge of emotion at this immediate acceptance, this acknowledgement of her worth that had become increasingly rare in Pine Creek. "I'm glad to help however I can," she managed. The crowd began to disperse, many approaching to welcome Sophia home and admire baby Joseph. Caleb conferred quietly with several men who appeared to hold some authority, while Eli and Marcus led the horses toward a stable. Ruth kept a gentle hold on Rebecca's arm. "You must be exhausted from the journey. I've prepared a cabin for you, nothing fancy but clean and private. You can rest, wash up, and join us for the evening meal if you're feeling up to it." "That sounds wonderful," Rebecca admitted, the reality of her new circumstances beginning to sink in. "But I should check on Sophia and Joseph first. Make sure they're settled." "Already taken care of," Ruth assured her. "Sophia's sister-in-law has a room ready for them, and I'll be looking in on them regularly. You've done your part bringing them home safely. Now let us take care of you for a change." Too tired to argue, Rebecca allowed herself to be guided through the settlement. As they walked, Ruth pointed out various buildings and introduced people they passed. The blacksmith shop, run by a former miner named Jackson. The tannery, where a woman called Clara crafted the finest leather goods in the territory. The communal dining hall, where many gathered for evening meals. "Most people take breakfast and dinner in their own homes," Ruth explained. "But supper is often a community affair, especially when weather permits outdoor seating." They passed the schoolhouse, where children's voices recited multiplication. Tables under the guidance of a young woman who Ruth identified as Catherine, formerly a governess from Boston who had fled an abusive employer. "Every adult contributes according to their skills," Ruth continued. "Some hunt, some farm, some teach, some craft. The council oversees fair distribution of resources and assigns critical tasks when needed." "And Caleb?" Rebecca asked. "What exactly is his role here?" Ruth's expression grew thoughtful. "Officially, he leads our security and organizes supply runs to trading posts and friendly settlements. Unofficially," she hesitated, "he's the heart of this place, the one people turn to when they have nowhere else to go, the one who remembers why we're here when others might forget." They had reached a small cabin set slightly apart from the others, nestled beneath tall pines, with a view of the stream. "Here we are," Ruth announced. "It's basic, but I think you'll find it comfortable." The cabin was indeed simple. A single, Room with a stone fireplace already laid with kindling, a narrow bed covered with a colourful quilt, a sturdy table and chair near the window, shelves along one wall, and a small dresser. What caught Rebecca's attention, however, were the bundles of dried herbs hanging from the rafters and the collection of bottles and jars arranged neatly on the shelves. "These were gathering dust in my cabin," Ruth explained, noting Rebecca's interest. "I have some knowledge of herbs and simple remedies, but nothing like your training. I thought you might put them to better use." Rebecca touched the herbs reverently, yarrow, sage, chamomile, and several she didn't immediately recognize. "This is incredibly generous." "We share what we have here," Ruth said simply. "Behind the cabin is a small garden plot where you can grow medicinal plants. The previous occupant started it, but she passed last winter. Pneumonia, too far gone by the time they brought her from the North Valley." A basin of water sat on a washstand near the bed, with clean towels folded beside it. A copper tub hung on the outside wall, visible through the window. "For bathing," Ruth explained. "The stream water is cold but clean. If you want it heated, the communal kitchen always has hot water available." Rebecca's borrowed saddlebags had already been placed at the foot of the bed. "I'll leave you to rest," Ruth said, moving toward the door. "Supper is at sundown. Just follow the sound of the bell. Don't feel obligated if you're too tired. Someone will bring food to you." When Ruth had gone, Rebecca sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of her situation. In less than a week, she had left behind everything familiar to follow strangers into the wilderness. Now she found herself with a cabin of her own in a hidden valley, surrounded by people who valued the very skills that Pine Creek had increasingly dismissed. It seemed simultaneously miraculous and terrifying. She washed thoroughly, grateful for the clean water and privacy, then changed into the simple dress Martha had packed for her, the only feminine garment she now possessed. Examining her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand, Rebecca hardly recognized herself. Her usually neat hair had grown wild from days on the trail, her skin tanned by mountain sun, her eyes somehow brighter, more alive than they had been in Pine Creek. She looked like a different woman. Perhaps in some ways she was too restless to nap. Despite her fatigue, Rebecca spent the next hour exploring her new home. The herbs Ruth had provided were of excellent quality, many of them varieties Rebecca recognized from her grandmother's teachings, but had rarely found in Pine Creek. The bottles contained tinctures and salves, some labeled in a neat hand. Others, a mystery to be investigated later. A knock at the door interrupted her inventory. Opening it, she found a young girl of perhaps 10 standing there, a small wooden box in her hands. "Miss Ruth sent these," the child said shyly. "She said you might need them." Rebecca accepted the box, opening it to find basic sewing supplies, needles, thread, scissors, thimble. "Thank you," she said warmly. "What's your name?" "Emma, Mom." The girl twisted the toe of her boot in the dirt. "Are you really a midwife?" "I am. Have you ever seen a baby born, Emma?" The girl nodded solemnly. "My little brother. Ma says I helped, but I was only 7 then." Rebecca smiled. "That's a perfect age to start learning. Perhaps someday you'd like to learn more about midwifery." Emma's eyes widened. "Could I? Pa says I ask too many questions about such things." "The best healers are those who ask questions," Rebecca replied, recognizing something of herself in the child's eager curiosity. "You're welcome to visit me and ask as many as you like." Emma beamed. "Thank you, Mom. I should go now. Ma needs help with the washing." She turned to leave, then paused. "Everyone's real glad you're here, ma'am, especially with Mrs. Turner's time coming soon." After Emma left, Rebecca found herself smiling. The simple interaction had done more to make her feel welcome than any formal introduction could have. This was why she had become a midwife, to connect with people, to pass on knowledge, to be part of the critical moments in women's lives. As the afternoon waned, Rebecca left her cabin to explore the settlement properly. Cedar Valley was larger and more established than she had first realized. Beyond the central cluster of buildings lay more scattered homesteads, some within the valley proper, others tucked into the forested slopes that lined its edges. People greeted her as she walked, often by name, news of her arrival having spread quickly. A woman named Grace proudly showed her the community garden where vegetables grew in abundant rows. Two men working on a new cabin foundation tipped their hats respectfully, offering to build shelves or make any repairs her cabin might need. The sense of shared purpose was palpable everywhere she looked, from the water management system that directed the stream's flow to multiple areas of the settlement, to the carefully maintained common areas where children played under watchful communal eyes. Near the mill, Rebecca encountered Ruth again, this time in conversation with Caleb. They both turned as she approached, and Rebecca was struck by how different Caleb appeared here. Still vigilant, still carrying his weapons, but somehow more settled, more at ease in his own skin. "Feeling more rested?" he asked, his eyes taking in her changed appearance with quiet appreciation. "Much better, thank you. Your community is impressive," she replied honestly. "Far more established than I expected." 3 years of hard work, he acknowledged, and good people who bring valuable skills. He gestured toward the valley at large. "Everyone here has a story, why they left the world outside, what they hope to build here instead." "I've been telling Rebecca about our medical needs," Ruth interjected. "We've managed well enough for minor ailments and injuries, but proper midwifery skills will be a blessing." "I'm glad to be of service," Rebecca said, "though I'll need to replenish my supplies eventually. Many of my tools and medicines were left behind in Pine Creek." Caleb nodded thoughtfully. "We have regular supply runs to Fuller's trading post and several other friendly outposts. Make a list of what you need, and we'll see it's acquired." The casual confidence with which he made this promise reminded Rebecca that, for all the settlement's apparent legitimacy, it was still funded in part by bank robberies and redistributed resources, as he had delicately put it. A moral complexity she was still coming to terms with. Ruth seemed to sense her discomfort. "Come, the evening bell will ring soon. I'll introduce you to more people before supper." As they walked, Ruth filled in more details about the community's structure. "The council meets twice weekly in the main hall, 7 members elected for 6-month terms. Anyone can attend and speak, but the council makes final decisions on resource allocation, work assignments, and dispute resolution." "And it works?" Rebecca asked, genuinely curious. "People accept the council's authority?" "Not always without grumbling," Ruth acknowledged with a smile. "But we've found that transparent governance with regular rotation of leadership prevents most serious conflicts. When someone disagrees strongly with a decision, they can petition for community review." "And Caleb? Is he on this council?" Ruth shook her head. "He's never accepted nomination, though many have tried to convince him. Says his role requires him to focus on security and external matters, not internal governance. Yet he clearly holds significant influence." "Influence?" "Yes." "Authority, no, at least not in the way you might think." Ruth's expression grew thoughtful. "Caleb believes deeply in what we're building here, but he's always been clear that Cedar Valley must belong to all of us, not become one man's vision. It's why people trust him, despite, or perhaps because of, the risks he takes on our behalf." The evening bell rang out across the valley, summoning people toward the central meeting area where long tables had been arranged outdoors. Children ran ahead of their parents, excited for the communal meal. Elderly residents walked more slowly, supported by younger arms. The scene reminded Rebecca of church socials in her childhood, but with a sense of genuine community that those often formal gatherings had lacked. Food was simple but plentiful. Venison stew, fresh bread, early autumn vegetables from the community. In gardens, Rebecca found herself seated between Ruth and an elderly man, introduced as Samuel, who eagerly shared stories of the valley's early days while they ate. "Nothing but wilderness when we first arrived," he recalled, gesturing with a piece of bread. "Caleb and Marcus spent weeks building the first shelters before bringing families in. Hardest winter of my life, but we survived it together." From me. Across the table, a woman named Margaret joined the conversation. "My husband and I lost everything when the bank called our loan early. 30 years on that farm, gone in a day. We were living in a tent outside of Laramie when Caleb found us. Said he knew a place where people looked after each other, where no one could take you home on a banker's whim." Similar stories emerged throughout the meal. Families displaced by railroad expansion, widows left destitute after mining accidents, former slaves seeking safety beyond the reach of bounty hunters still operating despite emancipation. Each had found their way to Cedar Valley through Caleb's network or through word passed carefully among those in desperate circumstances. As twilight deepened into evening, lanterns were lit, casting a warm glow over the gathering. Someone produced a fiddle, another a harmonica, and music began to fill the night air. Children danced while adults clapped in rhythm, the simple joy of the moment infectious. Rebecca watched it all with growing amazement. This was no crude outlaw camp, no desperate collection of fugitives. This was a community in the truest sense, people who had chosen each other, who shared resources and responsibilities, who had built something meaningful from the ashes of their previous lives. The weeks passed swiftly as autumn painted Cedar Valley in brilliant hues of gold and crimson. Rebecca settled into a rhythm that felt both new and strangely familiar, as if some part of her had always been waiting for this life. Her small cabin transformed gradually from borrowed space to true home. Shelves now held organized rows of medicines and tinctures, many crafted from plants she'd gathered from the surrounding wilderness. The garden plot behind her cabin flourished with late-season herbs, carefully tended each morning before her rounds. Word of her skills spread quickly, and not just for childbirth. A young hunter with a badly infected wound came at dawn one morning. The forest rangers with chronic coughs and rheumatism on another. Children appeared with splinters and scrapes, mothers with questions about feverish infants. Rebecca treated them all with equal care and attention, keeping meticulous records in journals Ruth had provided. Joseph thrived under her watchful eye, growing from fragile newborn to robust infant with remarkable speed. Sophia regained her strength and introduced Rebecca to the intricacies of valley life, where the best berries grew, which families made the finest jams or strongest moonshine, whose moods to be mindful of during council meetings. True to his word, Caleb ensured Rebecca's list of medical supplies was filled during regular trading runs. Sometimes weeks passed when she saw little of him, his duties taking him beyond the valley on mysterious errands she didn't ask about. Other times he would appear at her cabin door with a rare herb she'd mentioned needing, or to escort her to a distant homestead where her skills were required. These journeys together through the valley's outer reaches became moments Rebecca found herself quietly anticipating. Caleb was a different man, away from the responsibilities of leadership, more reflective, occasionally even playful in his observations. He knew every tree and rock formation, could read weather patterns in the morning sky, and possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of local plants that impressed even Rebecca's professional understanding. On one such journey to help an elderly woman with worsening heart troubles, they paused at a high meadow overlooking the entire valley. Autumn's first dusting of snow had fallen the previous night, making the world glitter in the morning sunlight. "I never thought I'd find peace again," Caleb said unexpectedly, gazing out over the community he'd helped build. "After we lost the ranch, after Sophia's husband was killed, Anger was all I had. Rebecca studied his profile, noting the lines. That fatigue and responsibility had etched around his eyes. And now I have purpose beyond revenge, he replied. These people, this place, it matters in a way that just surviving never did. You've created something remarkable, she acknowledged, though I imagine the territorial authorities might have a different perspective. A shadow of his old hardness crossed his face. The law protects property, not people, at least not people like us. And the bank robberies, she pressed gently. Will they continue? Caleb was silent for a long moment. We need resources the valley can't provide. Medicine, ammunition, tools. And there are still families out there suffering while banks profit from their misery. But the risk grows with each one, Rebecca pointed out. You can't help anyone if you're caught or killed. He turned to her then, his expression softening. Your concern is noted, Midwife. It's professional concern, she insisted, though they both recognized the falsehood. The community needs you. The children need their protector. The council needs your vision. And you? He asked quietly. What do you need, Rebecca? The question hung between them, laden with meaning neither had fully acknowledged during these months of growing closeness. Rebecca felt her heartbeat quicken as he reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face with unexpected tenderness. I need to know you'll be careful, she finally answered, unable to voice the deeper truth taking root within her heart. His hand lingered near her cheek. I've survived this long. Luck eventually runs out, even for outlaws with good intentions. Something shifted in his eyes, a decision forming. Perhaps it's time for new approaches, he said thoughtfully. The valley is more established now. We have goods to trade legitimately. Clara's leatherwork, the surplus crops. Maybe the risk of certain ventures should be reconsidered. Hope flickered within her. That sounds remarkably sensible for a notorious bandit. I contain multitudes, he reminded her with the hint of a smile, echoing their conversation on Fuller's porch months earlier. Besides, I find I have more reasons to return safely these days. The moment stretched between them, possibilities unfolding like the vast landscape before them. Then Caleb straightened, gesturing toward the distant cabin, where their patient awaited. We should continue. Mrs. Peterson will be expecting us. The first true winter storm arrived 2 weeks later, blanketing Cedar Valley in 3 feet of snow overnight. Rebecca woke to a transformed world, silent, pristine, and startlingly beautiful. Her morning rounds took longer as she trudged through snowdrifts to check on expectant mothers and elderly patients, returning to her cabin with cheeks flushed from cold and exertion. She had just stoked her fire and settled with a cup of tea when a frantic knocking rattled her door. Opening it revealed young Emma, breathless and wide-eyed. Mrs. Turner's time has come, the girl gasped, and Ruth says it's not going well. Rebecca grabbed her medical bag without hesitation. Run ahead and tell Ruth I'm coming, and have someone heat water, plenty of it. She pulled on her heavy coat, a gift from the community after her first month of service, and hurried through the snow toward the Turner cabin on the valley's western edge. Inside, she found chaos. Ruth attempting to calm Alice Turner, who writhed in pain on her bed while her husband paced anxiously nearby. The baby's turned wrong, Ruth whispered as Rebecca quickly washed her hands. Labor started last night, but nothing's progressing. Rebecca nodded, her mind already shifting into the focused calm that difficult births required. Mr. Turner, please wait outside. Emma, stay if you wish to learn. Ruth, I'll need your assistance. For the next 3 hours, Rebecca worked with steady determination, using all her knowledge and skill to gradually turn the stubborn infant. Alice's strength waned with each contraction, but Rebecca's quiet encouragement never faltered. You're doing beautifully, she assured the exhausted mother. The baby's moving now, just a little longer. When the infant finally emerged, a robust girl with a healthy cry, the triumph in the room was palpable. Ruth wiped tears from her eyes as Rebecca placed the swaddled newborn in Alice's trembling arms. "You saved them both," Ruth murmured as they cleaned the birthing area afterward. "I had nearly given up hope." "We saved them together," Rebecca corrected. "Your preparations and early interventions made my work possible." News of the difficult but successful birth spread through the community, cementing Rebecca's position as not merely a tolerated newcomer, but an essential member of Cedar Valley. That evening, despite the continuing snowfall, a steady stream of visitors brought small gifts to her cabin: jars of preserves, hand-knitted socks, a beautiful carved box for her herbs. The last visitor was Caleb, arriving after most of the settlement had retired for the night. Snow dusted his coat and hat, melting quickly in the warmth of her cabin. "Heard you worked a miracle today," he said, remaining near the door, as if uncertain of his welcome at this late hour. Rebecca smiled tiredly. "Just good training and a mother's determination. No miracles required." The Turners would disagree. He hesitated, then held out a small package wrapped in soft leather. "I wanted to give you this. Been saving it for the right moment." Curious, Rebecca unwrapped the offering to reveal a fine silver stethoscope, its metal gleaming in the firelight. Her breath caught. Such instruments were rare and expensive, particularly in the territories. "Caleb, this is something you need for your work," he finished simply. "Fuller found it through his Denver connections." She ran her fingers over the cool metal, profoundly moved by both the practicality and thoughtfulness of the gift. "Thank you. This will help immensely with diagnoses." He nodded, seemingly pleased by her reaction. "There's something else I wanted to discuss if you're not too tired." "Of course." She gestured to the chair by the fire, taking her own seat across from him. Caleb removed his hat, turning it absently in his hands. "The council met today. We've been considering our position for the coming year. The valley's grown beyond what any of us imagined, and with that growth comes vulnerability." Rebecca frowned slightly. "What kind of vulnerability?" "More people means more connections to the outside world, more chances for our location to become known. And the territorial governor has a new special marshal hunting outlaws with unusual dedication." A chill that had nothing to do with the winter night settled in Rebecca's chest. "Have there been threats?" "Nothing immediate," he assured her, "but we need to strengthen our legitimate standing, create buffers between Cedar Valley and those who might do us harm." "How would that work?" Caleb leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Fuller has connections with a Ute tribal leader who holds valid treaty rights to this entire region. He's willing to formally lease the valley to us in exchange for regular trade and medical assistance for his people." Rebecca's mind raced at the implications. That would give the settlement legal protection under federal Indian treaties. "Exactly. Not perfect protection, but better than our current situation. The council has voted to pursue this arrangement." He paused, meeting her eyes directly. "Which means we need someone to serve as medical representative in these negotiations. Someone with training the tribal leaders will respect." Understanding dawned. "You want me to go? You're our best representative. The tribal medicine woman is elderly and highly respected. Your knowledge of both traditional and modern healing would earn her confidence." Rebecca considered the proposal, recognizing both its strategic value and the trust it represented. "When would these negotiations take place?" "Spring, when the mountain passes clear. Fuller would accompany you, make the proper introductions." Caleb hesitated, something uncharacteristically vulnerable crossing his features. "I'd go myself, but my face is on too many wanted posters. My presence would complicate matters." "You trust me to represent Cedar Valley in such important negotiations?" "I trust you with everything that matters," he said quietly. The simple declaration hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning that transcended the immediate discussion. Rebecca felt a shift in that moment, from respected community member to something more fundamental, more essential to the future they were all building. "Then I'll go," she agreed, "though I'll need to learn more about Ute customs and medical traditions before spring." Relief and something deeper flickered in Caleb's eyes. "Ruth has some knowledge to share, and we have time for preparation." Winter settled fully over Cedar Valley in the days that followed, transforming daily routines as the community adapted to the season's challenges. Hunting parties went out daily, returning with deer and elk to smoke for the lean months ahead. Children's lessons moved entirely indoors, with Catherine teaching reading and arithmetic, while community elders shared practical skills like leatherworking and trap-making. Rebecca's practice shifted too, with more cases of chilblains and respiratory ailments requiring her attention. She began holding regular hours in the community hall, where a warm fire made examination of elderly patients more comfortable than in her small cabin. The Christmas season brought unexpected joy as the community gathered for shared celebrations. The school children performed traditional carols, handmade gifts were exchanged, and a feast featuring everyone's contributions filled the long tables in the main hall. Rebecca watched the festivities with a full heart, realizing how completely Cedar Valley had become home in just a few short months. Caleb found her near the doorway, observing the celebration with a cup of spiced cider warming her hands. "Merry Christmas, Midwife," he said softly. "Merry Christmas." She smiled up at him, noting the rare relaxation in his posture. "You've given these people something precious, a place to celebrate without fear." "They've built it themselves," he demurred. "I just found the valley." "You found more than that," she countered gently. "You found a vision worth fighting for." His eyes held hers for a long moment. "Walk with me. There's something I want to show you." Curiosity piqued, Rebecca set aside her cup and followed him into the winter night. Snow had ceased falling earlier that day, leaving the world crystalline and perfect beneath a full moon. Their breath formed clouds in the cold air as Caleb led her toward the small rise behind the community hall. "Careful of the ice," he cautioned, offering his arm for support as they climbed the gentle slope. At the top, he stopped and gestured. Toward the valley spread before them. Every cabin window glowed with warm light, smoke curling from chimneys into the star-filled sky. The sounds of celebration drifted upward, music, laughter, children's voices raised in excitement. "I come here sometimes," Caleb said quietly, "when decisions weigh heavily. It helps me remember what we're protecting." Rebecca understood the impulse perfectly. "It's beautiful." "I never expected this," he admitted. "When we first came here, it was just about survival, safety. I didn't imagine community, belonging." "Life has a way of giving us more than we plan for," she observed, thinking of her own unexpected journey. Caleb turned to face her fully, his expression more open than she had ever seen it. "Rebecca, I need to ask you something." Her heart quickened. "Yes?" "When spring comes and you go to the Ute territory, will you come back afterward?" The question surprised her. "Of course I'll come back. My home is here now." Relief washed visibly across his features. "I wasn't certain. You've built a place for yourself here, true enough. But you'd have options with your skills. The Ute would welcome you permanently. Or you could start fresh in Denver or any town." "Lucky enough to have you," understanding dawned. "You thought I might leave Cedar Valley?" "I thought you deserved the choice," he corrected. "You came here under unusual circumstances. You've more than fulfilled any obligation that might have created." Rebecca stepped closer, the cold forgotten as she searched his face. "Caleb Donovan, are you trying to give me permission to leave?" "I'm trying to make sure you stay because you want to." he said with quiet intensity, not out of duty or circumstance. The truth rose within her, impossible to contain any longer. I stay because this is where I belong, where my work matters, where the people I care about are. She took a deep breath. Where you are. The last words emerged barely above a whisper, but in the still winter night, they carried clearly between them. Caleb's expression changed, hope replacing uncertainty as he reached for her hands. I've told myself 100 reasons why I shouldn't say this, he began, his voice rough with emotion. The price on my head, the risks I take, the complications I bring to any life connected to mine. I'm already connected, she reminded him, have been since that night in my clinic. His hands tightened around hers. You deserve better than a man with my past. I deserve to choose my own future, she countered firmly. And I choose this valley, this community. Her voice softened. This man, if he'll have me. The last barriers between them dissolved as Caleb drew her closer, one hand gently cradling her face. I've loved you since you stood in that meadow and insisted on treating my wound before we continued, he confessed. Stubborn, fearless woman who valued healing above all else. Rebecca smiled through sudden tears. I've loved you since you sat outside my clinic all night protecting a sister and nephew you would die for. When I realized what you were building here, not just hiding, but creating something better, I knew my heart was lost completely. His kiss, when it came, was gentle at first, then deepening with a passion that warmed her against the winter. Chill. Rebecca's arms slid around his neck, years of loneliness and uncertainty melting away in the certainty of this embrace, this man, this moment. When they finally parted, breathless and smiling, the celebration continued below, unaware of the private joy unfolding on the moonlit hill. Caleb pressed his forehead to hers, content simply to hold her close. What happens now? Rebecca asked softly. Now. His smile was freer than she had ever seen it. Now we build something together. The valley, the future, a life. One day at a time. In the distance, the community hall doors opened, spilling golden light across the snow as children ran outside for an impromptu snowball fight. Their laughter rose into the night air, innocent and joyful. Standing together on that hillside, Rebecca and Caleb watched over the home they had found in each other and the community that had embraced them both. The midwife who had delivered a baby during a robbery. The outlaw who had returned to make her his protected healer, and the valley that had given them both a second chance at belonging. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.